As we've said before, the Franco-Prussian War ended with a sense of unfinished business, and so France and Germany would be locked into an arms race for decades. By 1873, the French had adopted a Chamelot-Delvin revolver chambering an 11mm black powder cartridge. Germany, in turn, adopted a massive, single-action-only revolver, which was obsolete the day it was introduced. Its cartridge, however, was copied from the superior Smith & Wesson .44 Russian. France didn't feel the need to respond right away, but then the Serbo-Bulgarian War of 1885 threatened to drag Europe into another conflict. While facing this possible escalation, the invention of smokeless gunpowder pushed France to turn to fresh small arms development, and they sought a new revolver. Hi, I'm Othais, and this is the French Modèle 1892 revolver, sometimes mistakenly called the Lebel revolver, although that's a misnomer. Let's throw up a bigger picture. This handgun measures 9.3 inches in length, weighs just shy of 2 pounds, and chambers 6 8mm Ordnance cartridges. When we talk about this revolver, we actually have to talk about another one as well. Now, our friend Boulanger, remember him from the Lebel? He wants France to hurry up and adopt some new small arms. He wants to make a name for himself. So, the French have a hold of some Swiss revolvers, the Model 1882. These are fantastic Schmidt-Galland action revolvers, double single. They use a great simple mechanism, and most of the features of this gun get carried over to the French's next adopted revolver, as we're going to see. The borrowed Swiss system had a loading gate that, when opened, would disconnect the hammer from the cylinder, and in fairness, this was also borrowed over from the Portuguese Atabey before it. The Swiss system also had a fantastic rebound, which means that when we fire the gun, if we let go, our hammer comes back and is kept from going forward again. This prevents that old cowboy problem of having to leave an empty cylinder. Now, the gun wasn't a direct copy at this point, alright? They introduced a couple new concepts. One was the French 8mm Ordnance cartridge that we see in this handgun, and two was a really easy disassembly gate. Previously, they were losing the plates on the side of the revolvers whenever they were serviced in the field. This gun has a hinged system, so we'll take a look, and it's so quick that I can show you on camera right away. We undo this big, large screw right here, real obvious guy. Couple twists, he pops out real easy on his own. And then we get our fingernails in here, pop open the side. Let me turn it around for you at home. We'll lift that grip out of the way, and boom, we're in the action. Very quick, very easy to service. And by the way, if you're a collector, this is a terrific feature for the revolver because you get to see the action work. Now, we've got an animation coming, so don't worry about looking too hard at this or squinting your eyes. But all of that combined is now what's known as the Modèle 1887, not the 1892. Okay, we're still in 1887. This gun is missing one key feature that we're about to see. All right, the 1887 is actually technically produced for a few years, but in very low numbers because Lebel production has just taken over the factories, and handguns are really a secondary issue. In the interim, over at Colt, they released the Model 1889. Now this gun's important because it has a swing-out cylinder and simultaneous eject. This is a terrific feature, and we see it in pretty much every revolver today. So the French say, we want this too. Well, in 1892, they have an upgraded version of the 1887, and lo and behold, over on our side camera here, we now have a swing-out cylinder with simultaneous eject. You're going to notice one odd feature though, which is that this has swung out to the right. On a normal revolver, we're going to see it swing out to the left, which concedes that most people are right-handed and they want to load with their non-dominant hand. The reason the French went with this is because they wanted to give these to cavalrymen, and cavalrymen were being trained to shoot with their dominant hand, true, but then while they're shooting or using a sword, they have their reins taken up in their left hand. So if they went to load, the thought was that they would use their finer dexterity, their dominant hand, to manipulate the ammo for single loading on a revolver. So that means we're going to move this over to the non-dominant hand along with the reins and open her up, leaving all that fine manipulation for your dominant hand, and we're going to grab our ammo and load with our dominant hand. Once ready, seal everything up and transfer over. The problem with that is not everybody is a cavalryman, so now when you want to use these things, there's a little bit of a hand change on the range. It's very awkward feeling. We're not used to this sort of thing, especially with modern safety practices, but it works, and it works for what they designed it for. Okay, now we'll get over to the animation. Turning the gate back frees the cylinder, and an extension presses the sear and attached hammer rearward, disconnecting them from the trigger. 6 rounds can be loaded singularly, and the cylinder pressed back into the action. The 1892 is both single and double action. We'll demonstrate the single action first. The shooter thumbs back the hammer, which tips up the rear of the trigger. As it tilts, the bolt stop extension on its front lowers as the hand, attached to its rear, rises. The hammer slips past the tip of the trigger's rear extension, into a notch just below. It is now held to the rear. A pull of the trigger frees the hammer to fall. Let's see it again. Now watch the single mainspring. It simultaneously presses the hammer forward and pushes down on the hand. In double action, we'll pull the trigger straight through to fire the gun. Here, the trigger extension lifts on the sear attached to the hammer. There is no catch at the end. Once the trigger is far enough back, the hammer falls. The cylinder stop extension on the trigger holds the cylinder between shots. But when fired, the cylinder is locked in place by the raised shoulder at the middle of the trigger and by the hand. Once all 6 shots have been discharged, the gate can be dropped again, the cylinder swung back out, and the ejector rod pressed quickly, tossing the spent casing simultaneously. Alright, let's get Mae to shoot this thing. Again, the weird gate means we switch hands as it opens to the right. This is a little awkward. Load up 6 rounds. And close the action. First, we'll see single action. Now, double action. Terrific. Thanks, Mae. Service life for the 1892 revolvers would actually be fairly long. These things were produced all the way up to 1924, although the bulk were done by the end of 1903. You would think that most would be produced during World War I, but the factories were overwhelmed with rifles and machine guns, and so France outsourced a lot of the handgun production to Spain. We're actually going to see that in our next episode, so spoiler alert. Now, these did serve on, like we said, through World War I and through World War II. They were even used by the German occupying forces. They stayed in inventory after 1945, but that was really sort of the end of their heyday. But 1945 is nothing to sneeze at for a handgun from 1892. Think of all the designs that came after that date. I mean, this precedes the Luger. This precedes the C96. And yet it's still in service at the end of World War II. That's terrific. The gun itself is robust. I mean, we enjoyed shooting at the range, although with the limitation on ammo, Mae was the only one that got to actually fire any rounds. It worked perfectly, which is more than we can say for a lot of the other designs that we've had to sort of play with over and over and over again to get you guys the best shots. There won't be a blooper reel of this one. What you see is what we shot. Now, these guns are usually dated on the barrel, right about here, and I know it's not going to show up well with our camera, but that's alright. You can trust me and check your own if you find one. The other thing is they were acquired by the Navy through the Army. These will be specially marked. Again, probably not going to show up well on our camera, but here's a photo of the naval anchor. Beautiful. The guns were also sold to Romania, who adopted them. They were produced in Belgium. Clones, rather, were produced in Belgium. And there were more clones out of Spain. So it wasn't an unknown revolver, and it's not as obscure as we tend to think of it. It's actually a frontline military weapon with a proud history. But before I start, giving this too much personality, let's take it over to Mae and get her opinion, since she's the only one on our team that's actually got to shoot it. All right, we rearranged the room, and we have Mae here to talk about the 1892. All right, walk us through it. It's a revolver. I know you like those, so let's get your impression of the double, single action, just sort of holding it and shooting it as a revolver before we get into the details about this gun.
Okay. Well, actually, I found that this gun naturally made me want to grip up high, so that was a little bit nicer. Just, it felt comfortable in my hand, first of all. And when pulling through for single and double action, I noticed that while it's easier than the more standard revolvers, it's not a heavy trigger, it's very mushy. So I found that it was not the best, most comfortable trigger to pull. The hammer's easy to pull back though. I can easily do it one-handed and even let the hammer down. So overall, it feels very comfortable for me as a shooter.
Okay, so you wouldn't say it's crisp though?
No, it's definitely not a crisp gun.
And I should probably tell everyone at home, Mae is a Smith & Wesson fan, so if you have a K-frame, that's sort of her gun. That's what she defines as being, middle of the road in terms of crisp and smooth, which actually when you get into old military revolvers, it's not middle of the road. It's actually very good. It's exceptional, those Smith & Wessons, but that's the reference point. And I kind of agree with you. I think it's kind of mushy. Mm-hmm. Everything's light. Everything breaks. It's almost like there's mud in it.
Yeah, exactly. But
okay, so let's get into some specifics.
Okay.
How do you feel about this loading system?
It was the most awkward revolver I have loaded to date. So, okay, you're supposed to lift the gate back, which honestly, for me, it didn't even seem like that was a necessary feature. I mean, why not just have something simple like with the Colts, where it's just a simple pullback?
And I'll say on these, if I borrow this for a moment, one of the reasons they retained this gate, and I'm trying not to point it at you, one of the reasons they retained this gate appears to be because they wanted the hammer disconnect. So, again, like we showed you before, there are safety features built into the Colts at the time, but I guess they went with what they knew. Although, like you said, it's awkward because if anybody out there is used to a gate loader, once you open the gate, you want to load through the gate. Mm-hmm. But now we're bumping the cylinder out, so I agree with you. It's kind of odd if you have any other experience. But if this was the only revolver you were given, probably not that weird. Although, again, I think handing between hands, did that bother you?
Yeah, actually, it was pretty awkward. And even on camera, it looks like I'm doing it awkwardly because that's how I can imagine having to do it on the battlefield, let alone on horseback. That I can't imagine at all.
Yeah, I mean, they had lanyards, thankfully, so if you dropped it, you had a chance to pull it back in.
Yeah.
But still, changing hands just doesn't seem tactically sound.
No.
But, we have the benefit of hindsight. Think again, 1892. And this first swing-out cylinder that we're seeing in Europe. Okay, so more specifics about this gun. Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw up an image over this. Well, let's take a look at that rear sight. There we go. It has a round sort of globe front post and a round notch in the back. How did you feel about that shooting?
I actually thought it was really easy to line up the sights for this one because not only was I able to line it up vertically, but also horizontally very quickly and easily as well. So when I was pulling up for the dead-on shot, it just wanted to line itself up.
Okay, so you'd say kind of like an aperture sight?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, cool. We're getting through it real quick. Is there anything else about this gun that you want to describe? I guess we should ask the classic question. Would you take it to war?
I would say yes, but two things that are bothering me with it. One is the loading system that we already talked about. It would just be a little too awkward for me to handle in a battle. And then the other thing is how light the round is. I can't really see that have enough stopping power for me.
You're talking about 8mm Ordnance?
Exactly.
Okay, it's not the heaviest revolver in the world. How would you say the recoil was then?
It was it was mild. I was very surprised with it. I've never had a revolver with that light of a recoil before.
We were not using light loads, by the way, as far as we know. I actually used a mix of 2 ammos just to be able to get as much 8mm ordnance as we could. And it just seemed like, I mean, we really had to adjust our mics. We had to get dialed in on it. It was very, very mild. So you don't have any confidence in that cartridge?
No, I do not.
All right. Well, I think that about covers it. Is anything else on your mind?
I've got nothing else for this gun.
Okay,
I think we
good.
covered it.
So we'll see you guys again in 2 weeks. And thanks again for watching. And while we're both sitting here, we went ahead and launched a Patreon. There's details down at the bottom of the video and over on Facebook and just about everywhere. We don't want to beg, but literally, if a quarter of the people watching this gave $1, we would be able to sustain the show just fine. Otherwise, we are currently in the red. We can't keep making them in the red. We don't make a lot of money. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks.